the initial planning phase of this Ghana Partnership Schools project, has observed that the GPS project, for short, seeks to hand over the management of low-performing public schools to private firms. And the Ministry of Education intends to reward these private firms based on the learning outcomes that they achieve in managing managing these schools. Now, the coalition views this as an attempt to commodify and privatize education using public funds. And on this basis, we believe that the Ministry of Education must apply the brakes for further consultation and review their approach in implementing the project. We are not against the project, but we are against any attempt to commodify education. Education is not a good. It is a public service. And for that matter, we are against the practice of engaging a private person to manage a public school and agree to pay the private person based on the learning outcomes. In that case, the motive will be profit, and we are against that. The coalition is aware of similar projects that have been implemented in other African countries, including Liberia, Kenya, Uganda. And in these countries, the partnership schools did not produce the intended outcomes. Rather, whatever gains they made were very marginal in comparison to the investment that were made by government in these countries, which were even higher than the regular investment they were making in public schools. And so government cannot afford to ignore this evidence and go ahead to invest in such a venture. Also, there is ample evidence that in Liberia, for instance, this PPP approach to managing basic education succeeded in pushing away excess pupils and underperforming teachers from these partnership schools, while retaining the best students and also the best teachers. What I mean is that because the private manager will be paid based on the learning outcomes, they are interested in admitting people who have a higher IQ, and for that matter, who are sharp. In the same way, they are interested in working with teachers who are very efficient. And so, in this arrangement, you find that the private manager can recommend that the teacher must be moved to another school, not their school. So if a teacher is bad enough and is teaching in one of these schools, why should the child be transferred to another school where Ghanaian children are learning there? And so we think that some of these things make the policy discriminatory in its sense. The experience from these African countries show that the model is not sustainable. Because in all these countries, these private consortiums did not have the means to sustain the schools without government support. Initially, when they come in as partners who have money to invest and sustain whatever gains that they aim to achieve. But they end up not being able to sustain the gains they made. A classic example is the case of the bridge schools across Africa, where the British Parliament itself came out and said that the approach is not sustainable. And so the information made available so far by our government does not clearly show how much additional resources these private managers intend to bring to the table. In other words, this policy is just another means of giving public funds to private actors. And we've witnessed some of these interventions in the water sector. Some time ago, we brought in aquavitens, and we know what happens. And just recently, we brought in another power distribution company for ECG. It is just another matter of giving public funds to private actors.